And it's, George, this is not the time for the recording. The meeting has not started, which I generally talk about as the most powerful role of a member in the organization. And George Friday is also on the national board in that role. And so thank you for starting the recording, George. But, you know, it's kind of obvious when the meeting starts and we start the recording. But let me call on Ann Holberg to see if her audio is working.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I'm Ann Hoiberg, and I've been somewhat of a coordinator here in San Diego. We are trying to get a branch up and running, and I'll be working on that. But today I spent my day working on a presentation tomorrow about immigration, migration, refugees, and asylum seekers. So I've been a little bit preoccupied with getting ready for that presentation tomorrow night. So I'm eager to really get a branch going. We had one going here in San Diego, but because the dynamite leaders had to step down and nobody stepped in to take over her really good work. So I hope to get that going this year. That's a goal for this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And could we go to Gloria McMillan? And then after Gloria, CC, be ready. Gloria, unmute yourself and introduce yourself, your roles in the organization.
Okay, I had trouble. It was a lag. Hello, this is Gloria, and I'm here in Tucson. I'm a member of the Tucson branch, and we're really hard at work getting the Chicago branch restarted. And I also would like to work on communications through the new CCS committee, and I will talk more about that committee and where it should be situated later.
Well, it's not a part of AHR.
Well, it is again. I think it's going to have to be because Darien is throwing a roadblock to its very existence.
Well, Gloria, I'm the co-chair of AHR. So we should talk about this offline.
Okay.
Because it's not a part of the agenda, and
it just came up on a big fiat from Darien.
Well, please, Gloria, chill.
I'm about as chilled as I'm going to be with this whole issue.
Well, don't be a disruptor. Mute yourself.
Would you like me to leave? I'll be happy to leave.
It's entirely up to you. If you
I think I might have to leave because I'm so upset that this is going on and nobody wants our subcommittee.
Well, this is not the place for your upset. Come on, we have an agenda. So after the check-in, everybody's checked in except CC Anderson, who is advancing human rights co-chair and board-elect member. CC Anderson, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening, good afternoon. CC Anderson, Atlanta, Metro Atlanta branch. And as Teresa said, I'm newly elected personnel chair. Glad to be here this evening. Thank you so much.
And we were asking people to say one thing about your day you want to share.
Oh, thank you. Just want to share the briefing of getting out to vote, getting people transportation and rides to the polls so that they'll be able to vote. Making sure we get our seniors in Atlanta, metropolitan Atlanta area out to vote.
Well, this sounds like a really early start. Are you talking about the November elections?
Yes, but we have to make sure we put plans in place and coordinate.
Oh, amazing. I love it. Well, what's next on the agenda, George?
AHR status, 3-year context.
Well, I thought it would be important, particularly since there are folks here who have either never attended an umbrella meeting or who are relatively new to advancing human rights. Well, just to give a historical context, I first became a member of WILF in the 80s, but in the more recent years, since 2012, I've been consistently a member and was a delegate to the CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women at the UN. And what people should know about WILF is that WILF has permanent status at the UN as an international organization. But because the UN is in New York, the UN office of WILF is also in New York at the UN. And because human rights is like at the core of what WILF is about, this committee has been trying to make sure it didn't completely go away. But there was a time when this committee did completely go away because of internal strife within the organization, which involved the president and another member. And then three Black women took over, and then they suddenly all quit within less than a couple of months. And then the committee was non-existent for a few months. And then the president and a longtime member, who I thought she would be here tonight, put together a kind of exploratory conversation, which George and I participated with. And so we began to build something that was a kind of interim process to get to the point where we could actually have someone who was willing to call themselves chair or co-chair. And we did have a recent chair who, for personal reasons, stepped down. And it was at that point that C.C. Anderson and I took the reins of being co-chairs. And C.C. and I have worked together for a very long time through the NAACP and being in Georgia together, particularly around voting rights and fighting voter suppression. And so C.C. Anderson and I are the elected co-chairs of advancing human rights for about 3 or 4 months, I think. And so that gives you a kind of quick historical context of a kind of rocky road for advancing human rights. But I really think that we're starting to get to the point where I like to be, where we're visioning about the work that we can do that will really engage the branches. And some obstacles that we have in terms of our status is that, quite honestly, the branches are weaker than I've seen them. And I've been around a long time, and to know that there's only one member in Cleveland when I started out in the Cleveland branch, and it was fiery in the 80s. And now there's one person there. And so I'm hearing what Ann is saying about San Diego, because I thought the San Diego branch was strong. And so that's how we're looking when we think about the branches that are represented on this call. Fannie Lou Hamer. We have a good political profile, but we're not a big branch. We do have our 10 members, and I would say at least 5 of us participate actively. But building, advancing human rights does require the participation of branches, city by city, state by state. And so let's have a few more comments since that was my perspective. Anyone else want to share their perspective of where they think AHR has been and is going?
Gloria's raising her hand.
Who?
Gloria.
Yeah,
Hi.
I can't see anything. Well, go
Oh,
ahead.
okay,
Gloria. I was
okay.
just going to say this is a good time.
So I'd like to say something about the branches that I'm aware of, and especially in Tucson. They have a very limited interest in being participants in anything from the national level. And my understanding is that is not unusual for some of the branches. They seem to have like their local issues, and that's kind of where they're at. They'll occasionally post something, but you cannot get them enlisted on many of the things that are national. There's always a couple members that will attend as individuals, but the branch isn't doing anything much with the national.
Oh, we're very glad to have you coming to the meetings because whether you are in a working group or not, that's a part of AHR. This is what we call the umbrella meeting. So people who are concerned about advancing human rights on every level are welcome here. And I do, at some point, I want to hear from Anne, since she, I believe it was you, Anne, who expressed interest in migration and border justice. But if we could start now with the working groups that do exist, because ending mass incarceration and the death penalty is a working group that CC Anderson and I co-convene, and we meet generally on the first Monday of every month. This month, because the first Monday was New Year's Day, we met on January 8th, and I'm trying to remember what happened. I was thinking we had a speaker at that meeting. CC, were you at that meeting? You want to report on what happened? Anybody remember what happened? Diane, you were at that meeting because that's where you suggested our campaign. So Diane, please help me.
I believe CC Anderson was supposed to give a report, but she never came to the meeting. That's my remembrance of it. But George has had her hand raised for a while.
Can I ask my question or make my comment? It's actually a comment. I don't remember much about the meeting earlier this month, except I remember Robin Lloyd coming in later. And part of me thinks there was a speaker, but I'm not remembering. So I apologize for that. I raised my hand because I was at a meeting yesterday, and a young man, well, younger than me, in his 40s, rode with me, and he had been to the protest or the support for Gaza in DC a couple of weekends back. He said there were 400,000 people there. And it's the energy then feels like this is a time when we can build branches and have people coming into Wills. I'm puzzled why that's not happening, why we're not just getting lots of attention online and whatnot. So that was the comment I wanted to make. That's all.
Hello, could I speak to that? I think I have an idea why this is hard to organize.
Uh, um, I'm sorry, I was muted. But what this is a meeting that we do want to stay focused. And
Okay.
George was saying earlier that she had a lot of coffee today, and for her to bring up what she just brought up, George, is really kind of strange because organizing is about relationships. And if you don't build relationships in the community where you live in order to build branches, you won't have branches. And that's something we have struggled about, George, in terms of Southern Piedmont. You have to recruit, you have to build branches in a way that asks people to join. See, the New York City branch went away 20 years ago, and our new member, Linda Ridley, is in New York. And I know quite a few people in New York. But New York is a tough city. And so trying to find people to join an organization that's over 100 years old and they never heard of it, it's a problem. And so there are lots of factors in why people don't connect with WIF. And I know because I've been in it a long time. And there are issues of inclusion, exclusion, diversity. So there are lots of reasons, but we don't want to use this meeting to start talking about branch organizing. Specifically, it's an obstacle to us doing the work, but we do want to talk about what the work has been. And I'm just surprised that everybody is so fuzzy about what happened on January 8th, because what we usually do is we go around and we say what's happening in the way of ending mass incarceration in our communities. And what stands out for me about January 8th is at the end, when we ask, what can we work on going forward? And Diane, in very serious clarity, said solitary confinement and the death penalty. So Diane, if you catch your cue, this is a segue into you talking about that.
Okay, well, to me, solitary confinement is such a horrible thing that we do a lot in the US. And then about half the states still have the death penalty. So I think that both these two items are just, just natural to work on under EMIDP. But anyway, also, I last week was lobbying with Senator Kane about Nicaragua. And he was talking about how bad Nicaragua was. Well, the problem is, we aren't so great either. But I think that, it's hard to. So I would like to get some stats also, not just state by state, but by country, because to hear that somebody complain like Senator Kane has all these issues with Nicaragua, but to think, come back and say, well, we have this incarceration rate too. We do these things too. I think is also would be a good thing to have. So I not only want to look at it in the U.S., but I'd like a little bit of effort done worldwide, particularly with the countries that we think are so terrible, and we have all these economic sanctions against them because of it and things like that. We have economic sanctions against a third of the world. So so that's one. I mean, but of course, the issue we want to work on in the U.S. is getting rid of the solitary confinement and the death penalty.
Well, solitary confinement is something I know a bit about in the context of the Black liberation movement, Diane, because there's significant political prisoners in the United States, and many of them are in solitary confinement. Mumia Abu-Jamal has spent many years in solitary confinement, as has Imam Jamil Al-Amin. And part of what solitary confinement is about is keeping the revolutionary thinkers away from the general population. It's the kind of isolation that is designed to break the spirit of the person who has been a freedom fighter, but also to keep the freedom fighter from influencing others. Because people who went to prison and came out to do great things, like Malcolm X and like quite a few other people who did their study and developed themselves while in prison and came out to be great leaders. So there is a political context for why the state confines people in that way, to break their spirits and to keep them from influencing anyone else with their fire. And so it is seen around the world as an inhumane form of treatment. Is unusual punishment that many countries and human rights activists find wrong and a violation of human rights. And that's why we want to work on it. But part of how we get started with that is the research. And I like to think of things state by state. So what is the policy on why people get placed in solitary confinement? And if you check out your state by talking to the Department of Corrections, you will know that there is a policy. How do people get, as they say, thrown in the hole? So when you get thrown in the hole and you're isolated and you're limited to getting out, and you get maybe 1 hour out in 24 hours, there is a method to the madness of solitary confinement. And we could do more study on it. And I think finding out what the Department of Corrections in Virginia, and I will ask specifically, because they do have policies, and we could just find out what those policies are. So those are some of the first steps we would engage in order to build a campaign. And on the side of the death penalty, it's a shame that we have lost touch with that fight, because when Troy Davis was killed, I believe the year was 2012, and I remember the momentum internationally to save his life, and the state of Georgia killed him anyway. And we said for many years after that, in the name of Troy Davis, we will end the death penalty. I would go to human rights meetings, and the name of Troy Davis would be invoked. And it's like the movement has weakened on really challenging the death penalty. But in some states, there's enough of a religious movement that says that killing people, to show that killing people is wrong, is not something the state should have a right to do. And so it was so beautiful being in North Carolina to see how strong the movement was against the death penalty. And I mean, just hearing the people speak against the death penalty. So these are the two things that Diane raised that I think we could work on, but we've got to feel it in our heart and in our spirit that this is such a serious human rights violation that we will make ourselves committed to it. So that is a proposal that has to be developed, and it'll be developed inside of the Ending Mass Incarceration and the Death Penalty Committee. Well, I'll stop talking now so that we can hear from Ann. And we do have a migration and Border Justice Committee. Are you there, Ann?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you could tell us about the work that you're doing on that topic.
Well, I probably should also mention that I am president of the International Museum of Human Rights at San Diego. So we do have a museum here that's dedicated to the promotion of the UDHR, and so that's what we've been doing for about the last 20 years. We're a museum without walls, and we do try to really promote the ending of the death penalty and, of course, solitary confinement. In my work as an author of a book about refugee women, I'm really working on trying to show how much we accomplish here in our country because of refugees. And in my book, I highlight the stories of 37 women, and all of those women have had to flee their country. And I do the history of 15 countries from which they had to flee. And we also talk about the importance of when they are vetted and they are approved or they are granted asylum to come to the US, they are so determined to do a monumental job here in the United States in promoting all of the UDHR rights, and we need to really emphasize the many contributions that refugees and asylum seekers bring to our country. So it's so integrated into my lifestyle about how I can really show how important it is for us to open up our communities for refugees and asylum seekers. It's just been such a rewarding experience to talk about the lives of these women, to share their stories, and to bring them on a panel with me. It's just been so enlightening for everybody who attends the sessions where these refugee women are. I think that's quite a bit about refugees here in San Diego and asylum seekers.
Well, it is quite a bit because you're right there at the border. But I can tell you, and I think we all know, that what's driving the crisis of people coming across the border is what's happening south of the border that has some influence by U.S. imperialism in terms of all the wars that have been created in and around Mexico, the Honduras, and I think about the School of Americas, or which is called something else now, WINSEC. But when you go inside of the facility that houses WINSEC, which is right here in Columbus, Georgia, they have pictures on the walls of all the commandants from all of the countries in Latin America who have participated in wars in their countries to gain power, and how they've been trained right here in the United States at the place that's not that far from where I live, but it's right here in Columbus, Georgia. They changed the name from Fort Benning to Fort Moore. So for us to understand what is fueling the crisis that's leading the governor of Texas to put people on buses and send them to so-called sanctuary cities. That is what we are fighting against as we fight for the recognition and respect for the fact that workers cross the border and they do a lot of the agricultural work, because I remember seeing how powerful that was in North Carolina. And so they set up H2H workers, HB2 workers. They have lots of names from them, but they actually grant uh, um, visas to folks who are willing to do agricultural work through various agreements. So it's all about money, profit, and how much can we exploit workers. And if we can't exploit them, we want to, if they're coming here and we think they're coming and they're coming in too many numbers, we do. But these governors are doing Florida, Texas, and other places that is really um, a violation of human rights. So thanks for letting us know about what you do, Ann. And I'm sorry, Adrian Bernal is not here because he has agreed to take up that working group. And so the third working group that we have that's operating is the UN Decade Reparations. And I propose that working group because the UN Decade started in January of 2015. And it will go until December of this year, December 31st, 2024. So we're in the last year of the UN Decade for people of African descent, which calls for recognition, justice, and development for African peoples around the world. And so this is something that Wolf International passed a resolution, thanks to the urging of me and George, in support of the UN Decade. And that happened in 2022 at the last triennial of Wolf International. So in 2025, at the next triennial, we will have to report section by section. All of the 52 sections are asked to report, what did you do in these 3 years for the UN Decade? And I think the US section will be shining because we've done quite a bit. We did a tour in 2023 that was really paid for by the Southern Anti-Racism Network, a nonprofit I started 25 years ago. But the idea was to engage Wolf branches. So we did a stop in DC with the DMV branch on August 8th. We did a stop in Philadelphia with the Greater Philadelphia branch on August 9th. On August 10th, we did a stop in New York City. And then I spent time in Rhode Island because I thought there was a potential for starting a branch there. And I had lived there, and we still are going to try to work on that. And then in Boston, where there's already a branch, we did a stop there, and we worked with Massachusetts Peace Action and the Boston branch. And so that happened in August, and it was about the UN Decade Reparations and No to NATO. And so this is some of the work of the UN Decade Reparations working group that I'm happy to say I initiated and that we want to continue. I had originally thought we could do something in the Midwest, but the branches in the Midwest are not strong. And so I was planning on doing a stop in Cleveland, a stop in Detroit, which there's a very strong branch in Detroit led by Laura Dewey that's been around a while, and they have great programs. And there's a branch in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti. It's not so strong, I know that Gloria is working on getting a Chicago branch started.
It's already started.
Wonderful. And then there's a Milwaukee branch that's been around for a while and a Madison branch. But unless there's a coordinated effort on the part of the national organization, the small nonprofit that I started can't afford it because we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. So we're really focused on that, and that will be in June. So that's the situation with the UN Decade. Now, George, I really need you to help with the last 45, with the last 15 minutes, because I see it's 45, and we have done the reports on the working groups, and I cannot see this tiny agenda, George. So what's next on the agenda? I think we may have already touched on it.
After you talked about UN Decade reparations, the potential campaign, passing reparation ordinances in cities and states, that's where you just were. The next things are new ideas and then announcements.
No, George. The ending solitary confinement and the death penalty, we kind of already talked about as a potential campaign. So we don't need to go over that because that's going to happen at the next EMI-DP meeting in February. And so, Diane, let's get together between now and then and start talking about a kind of strategic outlook for what we need, the research, etc. George and I have done this kind of basic strategic outlook of what do we need to get to where we want to be. And so we can have a conversation, perhaps the three of us, Diane, if you don't mind, sometime after January 30th, but not too far after January 30th, but definitely before the EMI-DP meeting. And so,
Okay.
oh, great, Diane. And so in terms of ordinances, we have talked about that. And in Columbus, Georgia, the bicentennial of the founding of Columbus is in 2028. So that is the target date when we can have the most momentum because this is a city that was founded during slavery in 1828. And I've already notified the city manager and the current mayor, who will not be mayor then, and it's possible we may have a mayor of African descent. So the goal in the bubble up conversation in the Black community is about how do we get reparations? And the program on February 26th about poverty ending strategies, reparations is going to be a part of that conversation on February 26th. So that's what's going on in Columbus, Georgia. Anyone else have anything going on in the way of talking about reparations in your city or state? George, do you?
Nothing new.
What about you, Cece? What's going on in Atlanta? Because the one thing I know about Atlanta, there's a woman who came to Columbus to speak, and she's actually head of this study group for Fulton County, and they've been given $250,000 to study what reparations looks like. And everybody was saying, why study? Just give the $250,000 to help make reparations happen. But that's the elitism that is so well known in Atlanta, that the academics and people with PhDs or whatever, they get to study and then give a report back and nothing ever happens. But I'm going to see if that changes. And Cece, we could talk about it because I want to identify that person to you who's heading up that project so you can do some accountability stuff. Are you with me, Cece? Cece, you're muted. Cece, are you paying attention? Well, dear sisters, at my 75-year-old, 57 years on the freedom side, I'm just having a hard time with the meeting tonight because it seems that there's
I hear you, Teresa. I hear you. I'm with you. I tried to research and find out who that person was as well. Thank you.
No. You don't need to research. She came to Columbus to speak. I know exactly who she is.
Okay, good.
Part. No, it's not good, Cece. If I could just do a little accountability thing, because the fact that the Metro Atlanta branch is not functioning after nearly 3 years means that there's no base of operation. And Peggy and Adrian and I met via Zoom. And sister, you were MIA. And so we just have to get back together and make sure the Metro Atlanta branch is functioning as a branch and things don't depend on you and your busy schedule, Cece, because there have to be more people working as a steering committee to build a branch. And I'm willing to help you and Adrian and Peggy Dobbins with that, because Peggy and Adrian have agreed to be the branch contacts on the branch's listserv, just to take that momentary detour. And so, are there any other ideas people want to bring up tonight before we confirm that our next meeting is February 19th and we can end this painful meeting? Are there any ideas that people want to?
Yes, I have an idea. I have something I need to report. We're having a nationwide Zoom, the second one for the Chicago branch, and it will be a scholar on the 1908 founding of the Immigrant Protective League, but it's going to be about immigrants then and now in Chicago, going into today's immigrants as well as the 1908 immigrants. So this is a very important one. We're connecting to the neighborhood around Hull House. We have a community organization that will house our meetings. They're committed to housing our meetings. And it's a heavily African-American Mennonite church. So we're in the community now.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I did see an email about that. Well, let me ask you, Gloria, when is that next nationwide?
Next one is going to be on Saturday, the 24th of February.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, I will mark it down now. What time of day will it be?
It's going to be at 2 p.m. Wait, let me get this right. Find it here. 2 p.m. Central time. So you're on what, Eastern time?
Yeah, so it'll be 3 p.m. my time.
3 p.m. your time. And you'll get more, updates. They'll be sent out through WILF, through the big, publicity machine.
Well, this sounds great. Well, that's
a big breakthrough. This woman, it's a wonderful, I won't take your time, but this woman's brother was shot, who's going to be speaking at our meeting. And she's a big community work on the committees at this church. And my heart went out to her, and she really wants to make a change in their neighborhood. And she said, WILF coming to them was like a miracle. She's really happy. And people, African Americans and Hispanics, they've been putting it out and they want to join. So this should be.
It sounds great. Yeah. Makes me want to go to Chicago, but I've been to Chicago in February before, and I don't want to go. It's so cold and brutal in Chicago.
She's a beautiful woman. Her name is Gloria too. Gloria Pierce is her name. So, really nice person.
Are there any other announcements?
Yes. On Monday, Darian wrote you about having the AHR committee sponsor this or recommend that this sign-on about AI. And I don't know if I consider this the committee to deal with AI, but she thought
it's
so.
Not really AI.
Well, I definitely did not see that, Diane. And I'm buried in email. most of the time. So could you forward that to me? I would like to respond because I agree with you. If you're talking about artificial intelligence, that is not something for advancing human rights to be taking up. There's nowhere in our history or in our current work that would lead us towards that.
I actually think it might fall better under disarm, but anyway, I
Yeah,
don't know.
it does. It falls better under disarm, excuse me.
Okay. I didn't respond because she wrote it to CC, and she wrote it to you and George Friday, and then disarm chairs, and I don't know who this is, and Barbara Nielsen and Regina Sneed. And that came out Monday at 3:15 a.m. So anyway, just FYI.
Thanks,
Well, George,
Diane. I
did
didn't
you
know
see
about
it?
it either.
George, did you see it? And CC,
No, I did not see it. So thanks, Diane, for that. I can look for it now.
Well, CC and I can talk about it as co-chairs of the committee, but I think it's a bit off. And so the other announcement I would like to make is that it's my hope that this housing crisis can be added to advancing human rights. It is what I work on here in Columbus, and I just got a retaliation from the powers that be. I didn't think they would do it to me, but they did. They evicted me, but I did have my contingency plan together. So when I was evicted on January 18th, when those sheriffs knock on your door, they don't give you long, and the management just turns the key and come in. My alarm was blasting. They said, turn off your alarm, show your hands, and all you can do is stand back and let them throw your stuff in big black paper plastic bags. But it was the most a sense of relief. I had been so unhappy in that apartment, and my new landlord is absolutely fabulous. And in my new home, because all I did was pick up the phone and call my contingency plan, say they're here, bring the U-Haul truck. And we were off the property in less than 4 hours, and I was in my new home by nightfall. And so I'm just happy when I lie in my bed in the morning and look out the window. My windows are 15 feet off the ground, so all I see is sky and beautiful glistening trees. I am so happy to be away from corporate apartment rentals. A nice house with a fenced-in yard. So that's my little announcement, my happy announcement, being evicted and rising above the corporate management, and I'm paying $400 less a month for my 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath than I was for my 2-bedroom, 2 bath in a corporate situation. So are there any objections to doing the next meeting on February 19th, which is President's Day? I never really do anything on that day, but we would do the meeting at 8 p.m. on that day. Are there any objections?
No objections. I did join late, Teresa. This is Tina. Just wanted to let you know I'm here.
Oh, wow, you are late.
Well, I caught the last bit, but Gloria's announcement, and I had another meeting. Sorry, but I just want to say for Border and Migration Justice, I'm going to reach out to Adrian. Sounds like you've talked to him recently, and
Well, Tina, I wish you wouldn't,
oh,
because
okay.
CC and I, as co-chairs of the committee, are going to pursue that objective that we almost have achieved of the
Okay.
people most affected by the descendancy of being put upon by border and migration and justice are the people of color who are Latinx primarily. And so Adrian is that person who has agreed to take responsibility. And though Rita was working with him, she actually lives in Mexico and she has since resigned. So this is something that Cece and I can do because
Okay.
Adrian and I are very close. And you're working on the program for the triannual. So if you could introduce yourself, Tina, and tell us what the status is of the program for the triannual.
Sure. Sure. Happy to take that. Um, uh, j- I guess I'll have a question for you about border migration justice after. The program is coming along well. It's a very exciting program. People who are working on it are very excited about it. It is called Water on the Front Lines for Peace. The triannual Congress. I think everybody on here is probably anyway, it will be the first in-person Congress since 2000
Tina, why don't you just introduce yourself and we can end the meeting.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
a little after 9, and we
Okay.
do have generally a hard stop at 9 because I don't
Okay.
think people know your branch and they don't know your roles in the organization. So could
Okay.
you please do that?
Thanks, Teresa. My name is Tina Shelton. Have been involved with the Border and Migration Justice Committee, and happy to be part of AHR umbrella. And I'm outside of Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia suburbs, where things are happening for reparations, which is exciting. We have a branch here. It's called the Greater Philadelphia Branch. I am also a newly elected board member, so will be attending my first meeting on Saturday, and yeah, hope to be on the next meeting on the 19th. And thanks a lot.
Well, and I must say that the Philadelphia stop of the UN Decade Reparations No to NATO Northeast Solidarity Tour was by far the best attended. It was so dynamic, and we have a beautiful picture. And seeing Tina there in her element, it was really wonderful. And so the branch participation in Greater Philadelphia is wonderful. And there were so many people from the community, lots of people of African descent. And my friend Yanaka took the train all the way from DC to speak. I had forgotten that I asked him, and there he was. So it was a fantastic event on August 9th in Philadelphia, 2023. Well, dear sisters, we do generally try to have a hard stop. We're only 3 minutes past 9, and I want to say good night. And I will see you probably at the program committee meeting. I hope you will attend that, which George Friday will be chairing, and that is on January 30th, right, George?
Yes, ma'am. Tuesday, January 30th, 8:30.
8:30. So
Yep.
we're really gonna push the East Coast people with that one.
Yes.
Who can attend the program committee?
Everyone.
Oh, okay.
It's
So
open.
January 30th.
Yep. I'll send out a link tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
Take care, people.
All
Bye.
right.
Okay. Dr. Linda, let's try to catch up at some point this week, if you don't mind, Dr. Linda.
She left.
Oh, okay. Well.